that day when the bus driver asked me to get up, I had this feeling come over me. It felt like Harriet Tubman was holding me down, hands were holding me down on one shoulder, and Sojourner Truth hands were holding me down on another shoulder. And I was glued to the seat, and I could hear the white passioners saying, "She gotta move, she gotta move, that's the law, she gotta move." And I felt like this is my time to take a stand for justice.
Black history operates in many forms, shapes, and sizes, from our local heroes to our international activists, but the power of narrating the lived experiences of Black people who have accomplished so much for our communities is often a curse by the ones we choose to forget. This is Claudette Colvin, and in 1955, she refused to give up her seat to a white passenger 9 months before Rosa Parks did the same thing. She grew up in the rural town of Pine Level, Alabama, about 30 miles from Montgomery, on a farm run by her great aunt and uncle. But even as a small child, surrounded by farm animals, 2 pet dogs, and idyllic countryside, she felt the burden of racial oppression. When she was 15, she refused to move to the back of the bus and give up her seat to a white person 9 months before Rosa Parks did the same thing. Most people know about Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott that began in 1955, but few know that there were a number of women who refused to give up their seats on the same bus system. Most of the women were quietly fined and no one heard much more. Colvin was the first to really change the law. At 15 years old, she had just been learning about influential Black leaders and racial oppression and decided that the injustice had to end. In 1955, Colvin was a student at the segregated Booker T. Washington High School in the city. She relied on the city's buses to get to and from school because her family did not own a car. The majority of customers on the bus system were African American, but they were discriminated against by its custom of segregated seating. On this day, March 2nd, 1955, she was returning home from school. She sat in the colored section, about 2 seats away from an emergency exit. However, according to Jim Crow law at the time, if the bus became so crowded that all the white seats in the front of the bus were filled until white people were standing, any African American was supposed to give up their seat to make room for whites, or move further to the back and stand in the aisle if there were no free seats in that section. When a white woman who got on the bus was left standing in the front, the bus driver commanded Colvin and 3 other Black women in her row to move to the back. The other 3 moved, but another Black woman, Ruth Hamilton, who was pregnant, got on and sat next to Colvin. The driver looked at the woman in his mirror. He asked them to get up. She said that she was not going to get up and that she paid her fare and that she didn't feel like standing.
I was 15 years old. And the rule in the segregation that a white person had to sit in front of you and you sit behind them. And so the bus driver asked me to get up. I was shouting, "It's my constitutional right, so I'm not going to move." And that's when the policeman dragged me off the bus.
Colvin's arrest was not the first instance of a Black person in the South refusing to give up their seat on the bus to a white person, but it did not come at a pivotal moment for the civil rights movement. Fred D. Gray, a prominent Montgomery lawyer and activist, took Colvin on as a client, his first civil rights case, with the aim of filing a federal suit to desegregate Alabama's bus system. Local civil rights leaders, however, decided not to proceed, in part due to Colvin's age, but also because, by her own assessment, she was dark-skinned and soon became pregnant at the age of 16. These factors, some feared, would hurt her chances of winning the case, unlike the known community figure who soon followed in her footsteps, Rosa Parks. On December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks, a 42-year-old seamstress and NAACP secretary, also refused to vacate her seat on a Montgomery bus for a white passenger and was arrested. Days later, segregated buses became a central site of struggle. The Montgomery bus boycott, during which black residents refused to use the city bus system, began on December 5, 1955. Colvin would later become one of the plaintiffs on the federal case Browder versus Gale, filed in February 1956 during the boycott, which ultimately led to the desegregation of Montgomery buses. But why has Colvin been overshadowed in the public discourse of civil rights history? Reasons such as colorism and her young age have been touted for the sake of brevity. Let's discuss the impact of her hair and pregnancy. First, Colvin was pregnant and out of wedlock at the time, creating the fear that this would displace the narratives of bus desegregation, as people would only be talking about her supposed vices. Rosa Parks stated that if the white press got a hold of that information, they would have had a field day. They called her a bad girl, and her case wouldn't have had a chance. This led to E.D. Nixon, the NAACP president of the Montgomery chapter, rejecting Colvin as a plaintiff. It is disheartening that Colvin was shunned for her pregnancy, though considering the wider issues women had to deal with at the time in terms of the lack of sexual autonomy, this is not surprising. Civil rights activists ignored Colvin because of her pregnancy, revealing the sexist attitudes within the civil rights movement itself, though also emphasizing the movement was one reflecting the social attitudes of its time. The fact that women had to be gentle to be accepted by civil rights activists reveals the sexist mentality within the movement, though also it further reflects the need for the movement to appeal to the social mores of the 1950s for it to achieve its goal. This structural sexism affected many female civil rights activists, with Parks even recalling Nixon to have told her that women need to be nowhere but in the kitchen. It also alludes to the relationship between civil rights activism and Christianity, since the movement ostracized Colvin because of her pregnancy being unacceptable to the Christian establishment. Another factor is that it was believed that she did not have good hair, which many leaders felt made her not a worthwhile lead advocate. This highlights that the civil rights leaders themselves failed to fully comprehend wider, more implicitly racist issues such as European beauty standards. Colvin did play a role in Browder v. Gale in 1956 as one of the 5 plaintiffs for the case, yet her role was still underplayed and is not fully appreciated within wider public discourse. However, there have been many who have recently fought for her contributions to be recognized. For instance, Philip Hoos, in his book Twice Toward Justice, criticizes campaigners for failing to recognize Colvin. Colvin's family has also fought for her recognition, challenging the National Museum of African American History and Culture in 2016 for not dedicating a section on Colvin. Colvin was recognized somewhat in 2017 when Montgomery named March 2nd Claudette Colvin Day, claiming that she was an early foot soldier in the civil rights movement. What is the takeaway message? Considering that this is Black History Month, we must diversify our historical scope and unearth forgotten figures known to the public, whether they are contemporary figures or one of the many Black historical figures of the past who, just like Colvin, were incredible agents of change for the world and our communities.